So we have now already a representation of the two emerging models. We have the full department, like Zinta said, where you pull out the context, put them together, empower them. And what Gilles explained is you basically put somebody who's maybe not have all the resources, but who's a helper to the organization. So Lutz, over to you. Can you comment a little bit your view on both models and where you are at?
Yeah, look, we're actually going down a third path, to be honest. And what we're doing is we're really trying to integrate the patient centricity in what everybody does in the organization. It starts with our CEO. I don't know how often I've heard our CEO say it's all about the patients. And then if you take a look, we heard about the patient journey. And if the patient journey is really truly happening and we buy into that picture, then their disease is along for the ride. And if the disease is along for the ride, we need to accompany them throughout that whole journey. And that means it really starts with the R&D group and figuring out what do you really want to develop in order what to do. It then moves on essentially through medical affairs to educate, because in the field of rare and serious disorders where we work, we find that patients can be very effective in educating their physicians, because physicians might not be seeing that specific presentation that often, and it can take years until patients are diagnosed. So that is something that is very relevant. And then it kind of pulls through all the way to market access, not just getting access to the product as you would want it, but also getting access to it in such a format that it is integratable into your daily lives. For an example, if you have an IV therapy, which you can then cut out one infusion per week, what that really means is not just one infusion a week, it's 52 times a year less and 52 times the hassle less. And I think understanding all that really means that the whole organization has to buy into it. And that's why we really try to push it to each and every person in the company.
Very interesting. Now, this is something that comes up a lot. So we have these different models, and I'm going to go back to Lutz because I'm not going to let him get away this time. But here's the point. If you have everybody engaging, what you really get is chaos. You're the general manager, you're in charge. How do you make sure that information doesn't get lost? And Zinta has at least a clear structured model. He's got a leader. What are you doing? It's a mess.
Yeah, look, you can always say the genius can look through chaos, but I'm not going to go there. No, honestly, I think it doesn't become chaos because you do have structure around it. We do have the global business teams, for example, which are cross-country, cross-functional, and they do have to take a look at what happens in terms of the input. And I think what you also have to do is that the understanding of what the patient needs are have to happen at the working level, so that you don't have somebody telling the person who's doing it, this is going to be relevant for the patient. But through their interactions and their understanding of the patients, and through the long-term commitment, they should know what is important for the patient organization. And by doing that, you have the information at that part in the organization which can do most about it. And that's what I think we're doing.
So, Zinta, I see you nodding. Can you add something?
Yeah, well, we at the beginning of this year had an engagement with one of the patient associations we have a very long-standing relationship with. And essentially both of us were a little bit dissatisfied with the way that our corporation was working. So we arranged to have a strategy meeting. And we had under confidentiality, they shared their strategy with us, we shared our strategy in that particular disease area with them. And then we aligned. We said, okay, there are these 4 points of contact where the strategy actually fits. So therefore, though it's only in those 4 areas that we will then work together so that any activities that they're doing or we're doing are actually aligned to a final goal of achieving whichever item it was on that strategy. And that seemed to work as a really good engagement. It stopped a lot of disperse, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that in my company, and made, if we're only going to do those 4 things this year, because they're the ones that they want to do, we want to do, and we can do better together.
Okay, thank you very much. That's great. So Gilles, can you take that up to the transnational level? Because Zinta's doing more country or smaller region, but now you have to make sure that what she learns in the UK actually goes to Hungary. How do you do that?
Well, I think we don't have yet an organized process, but what I'm starting with is to create the right mindset and to get everybody aware of the fact that they have, they do dialogue with patients. It's amazing. You talk to the QA people and they say, yeah, we got complaints from patients, or we get friendly calls from patients, or we get advices from patients about, change your packaging, it will be better, or do this, do that. And what do you do with it? Well, we like it or we dislike it, and that's it. Mm-hmm. You talk about also people in the accounting department. They receive calls from pharmacists or patients that say, your product is too expensive, or I have problems with the reimbursement. I'm saying, what do you do with it? For the moment, nothing. So the intention is that, across all countries, then I think by function, the QA people sort of sit together and say, what do we do with this fantastic nuggets we have of communication with patients? The finance people can do that too, together with the commercial organization. So the way we try to organize it is to empower all the divisions to look at what they can do for the patient interaction, and to have this coordinated by this chief patient relationship officer.
That's fantastic. So actually you mentioned the finance department. So let's make that a question. Lutz, how do you make sure your finance people also get it? And that it's not just the R&D people, the compliance people. How do you make finance? How do you make HR? How do you make them buy into, organizationally, I mean?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really important comment, because it even goes beyond finance and I think the other part. It goes back to the plant, to the people who might on the Saturday or on the Sunday have to put in that extra shift to make the product available. And what we do, actually we do regularly at our sites, we bring in representatives of patient organizations and to talk about what the difference that we do makes for them and for the patients that they represent. And we found that to be really something that is highly appreciated both on the side of our employees, because now they can say when they're not at home on a Saturday afternoon because they're away at the plant packing or doing something, why they're doing it. And it also makes a difference on the patient organization side because they understand us a bit more. And I think by doing that, getting to know each other better, you can achieve that, what you're asking.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Now, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So I think this is very clear, very helpful what you said. Now, at this meeting, we have a lot of companies who use digital as the way forward, okay? But one patient told me recently, said, before you go digital, please go patient. Mm-hmm. And there's something in that. So, Zinta, why don't you kick it off and then I'll go back to Gilles.
Yeah, and I'll probably illustrate with the story of something we actually stopped. We had a new therapy some years ago, and we thought that, in discussions with patients that there might be some additional requirement for support, information, what's happening when you're taking the medicine and so on. So we actually engaged a healthcare psychologist plus patients to create an integrated system which was can be tailored by the individual patient to get what they wanted. Newsletters, information, reminders to take the medication. Big chunky piece of work there. And it didn't work in the UK. It worked in other countries, but in the UK it didn't work. So we had to retire it because we basically said, if it was that wonderful, people would be knocking down our doors to get it, and they're not. And I think it's probably to do with the integration of the number of touch points that a patient has. So they have touch points with nurses, with doctors, they have touch points with pharmacists, and different people get different information through different channels. They have their own needs. And what we hadn't built in was a kind of evolving, we start with this, but then we tailor it and we refine it so it becomes something that is truly of value to the patient, not what we think is of value to the patient.
Zinta, I think it's fantastic because very rarely will you get a general manager standing up and say, we tried this and it did not work.